Welcome to Covered, the insurance law podcast for corporate policyholders. I'm Vince Morgan.
I'm Claire Cahoon. How are you doing today, Vince?
Pretty good, Claire. Just trying to make a living. How about you?
Good. Me too. I think I'm thriving today. I would describe my feelings today as thriving.
That's what we want to hear. I mean, associates who are thriving, right? What more can you ask for from a big, giant law firm, right?
That's very true. Happy to be here.
Okay. Well, I got to tell you, Claire, you have been working with us for a few months now, and you've worked on lots of different kinds of coverages and coverage issues and things like, who's going to control the defense in a lawsuit and how do we, we've got these winter storm claims, right? Some of our clients have spent, hundreds of millions of dollars on, power costs, and are those recoverable? And You've looked at a lot of different issues. What would you say has been your favorite coverage issue so far?
Let's see. Well, as you know, Vince, I'm a little bit of a nerd in certain senses. And one of those senses is that I really love all of the law surrounding data privacy and cybersecurity. I think it's super duper fascinating. I tell people that I like it because it's emerging law. We've had cybersecurity issues for a very long time, but the law is always a little bit slow to catch up. So a lot of the law that we're making around these kinds of issues, we're just kind of making up as we go, which makes it really fun to be a lawyer. And I learned upon joining Bracewell that cyber insurance is just as hot as cybersecurity and data privacy writ large, which was great news to me. Hotter. Ooh, wow. Yeah. I think you're right. I think you're right. And it's just, it's really cool because it intersects so often with other legal issues that you might be looking at in a cyber incident case. And I think that what maybe some folks in the corporate world might not have cyber insurance or aren't really sure why they should get it. And I think you can explain it pretty simply in terms of, why do you get insurance to begin with? There's a high potential of something happening and you're not going to be able to cover the cost of that happening. So maybe 20 years ago, the odds of you getting hacked and losing all of your data and having to shut down your business for multiple days to recover all that data was lower. But it is very, 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 very likely that if you are a business of any shape, size, color, creed, you are going to get hacked. It is an inevitability at this point. And so it's one of those events that now you really need to start getting serious about how you're covering those risks. So I think cyber coverage is fascinating and super, super important.
Totally agree. And it is interesting because it's something, every day, right? You see, there's some cyber incident that makes the news every day. And
I know.
It's really fun to be able to help clients, and I've responded to cyber incidents and helped clients work through the coverage issues in the past where literally they send their IT department to every Best Buy in a city, right? And buy every single computer they have for sale, right? And no joke. They're like, how many PCs do you have? And then, we have 718. They say, great, we'll take all of them and try and build a computer network from the ground up, it's just, it's really interesting to see that. And then, generally the carriers are pretty good responding to these claims. Sometimes we run into challenges and this kind of thing. Like, do you use their forensics team? Do you use, the law firm, the PR firm, and all this kind of stuff? But we love to get in there and help clients work through that stuff.
Yeah. And those kinds of questions are kind of, it's the answers are going to evolve in the situation. And as we start kind of learning how to best handle these situations more, as a legal community and as a business community. And then, when you're talking about the kinds of damages that you can have in those situations, in a way, having to buy new computers is kind of the best case scenario. I don't know. Did you read that client alert that a couple colleagues and I wrote about the hack on that water utility in Florida? That someone got into the water utility and changed the chemical levels in the water utility system. That's absolutely terrifying. And luckily they caught it before any infected water could get to anybody and hurt anybody. But, that's one of those risks that you just, you really don't want to be stuck handling that all by yourself.
Yeah, and just so you know, Claire, I read all of your client alerts.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I think I authored part of that one, so I'm sorry that wasn't memorable. But
we
that's
talked about cyber in there.
That's all right. Maybe you can go back and read it, and you might see my name somewhere in there where we talked about the cyber insurance issues. Yeah,
I believe you 100%.
No, that is always the scary thing for the utilities, right? Is because they all use sort of similar systems to control these things, and that's a terrifying issue for our clients in that space. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, we're happy to be able to do it. Now, today's guest, Claire, is Bain Head from CAC Specialty. And Bain is also, some lines of insurance, frankly, are kind of very well established. There's not much, fancy wheeling and dealing going when it's just, like a commercial general liability policy. The form is the standard form. And, you may need, a few things here and there to modify it. But generally speaking, that's just a pricing exercise and claim service and things like that. You're not negotiating the terms of a CGL policy by and large. But now there are certain lines of coverage, as you know, like cyber, D&O, and reps and warranties that where actually we can get in there and work with a great broker and help a client, how would this policy wording, play out in court? Or if we had this kind of loss, how would the policy respond? Those kinds of questions. And we can work with wonderful brokers to help our clients understand these issues as they're buying this stuff. And Bain is one of those. Bain, she is one of the best D&O brokers in the country, and then she also does transactional work as well by helping their clients place these really complicated policies that are geared to a very specialized set of risks. And so Bain is really great at that. And so I'm delighted to have her today. I mean, it's again, our job works much better when we have great broker partners to work with. And Bain is one of those.
Well, I cannot wait to hear the interview. I think it's going to be great.
Sure. Now, is there any question you'd like me to ask Bain just to embarrass myself or humiliate
yes.
me? Yeah.
Let me think. I would like to know whether Bain has a particular favorite of your repeat jokes. I'm sure, having worked with you long enough, that she has an ongoing list. And I just want to know what tops that list for her.
Sure. I think I have a guess, but let's not spoil it.
Okay, all right.
I think I know what she would say, but I will ask her that, and and then we'll see if my guess is right.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Now, here's our interview with Bain. So what we kind of talk about, some of the things that our listeners like to hear, and I totally want to make sure that we come back and hear, sort of your latest advice on, D&O or any other lines of coverage that you're working with these days. But, let's just start kind of at the basic. Our listeners always like to hear how people's careers have evolved. And Bain, I think we've known each other for probably a decade, maybe more. I don't know for sure. I know that, we, met when we were in grade school. Right. So, but they like 15. To hear. That's right. Yeah. They like to hear how folks ended up in their current roles. So if you could talk to us a little bit about how did you end up from beginning to end in the quickest way you think you could describe that. Our folks always love to hear about how folks have, how they started and how they ended up in the role that they're currently in.
Sure. Well, I think I'm like many people who found myself in insurance unintentionally. And I have sort of a funny story about when I started. I was at University of Texas, and I had majored in finance and accounting because my parents told me I had to. And I was interviewing on campus with banks and with this company called Alexander & Alexander, which billed themselves as a risk management consulting firm. I had no idea what that meant. I had not taken a single insurance course. All my electives were in real estate. But they just had this really neat sounding management training program. It was in Houston, which is where I was from. So I took that job. And on the first day at lunchtime, my dad loves to tell this story. I called him and I said, "Why didn't you tell me? How could you not have told me? I am an insurance salesman." And he just laughed and thought that was hysterical that I had not sorted that out before I actually got there. But here I am, like 28 years later, still in that career, and I credited a lot of that A&A office in Houston. I just had the opportunity to work with some amazing people. My first boss was a gentleman named Doug Burnham. He's the one who taught me how important client service is, and that, but for them, the rest of us wouldn't be here. I had the opportunity to learn from a gentleman named Dick Mayfield, who taught me that you can never read too much. Like, read everything. And back then, that was even before email. So he was reading newspapers and any sort of newsletter he could get his hands on, and sharing that information with clients and with his coworkers. And that's something that really stuck with me. And then I learned the D&O business from a gentleman named Tom Nygren. And he's the one that taught me everything about how a D&O policy works, and also how to gracefully tell people the hard news, sort of the hard facts about what was happening to them. So A&A was bought by Aon in the mid-90s. I stayed there for several years. Then I set out for a smaller shop opportunity, privately held company, McGriff, Siebels & Williams. I was there for 17 years. And at this point, I was exclusively in D&O and what we call financial lines, employment practices, E&O, that sort of thing. And had a fabulous career there, helping to manage their book of business in Texas. And almost 2 years ago, it was 20 months ago, left McGriff to help form CAC Specialty, and a startup, which was a whole new thing for me, but still doing what I have been doing for all these years, which is D&O insurance. And it's been fun. It's been a blast.
Well, that's awesome. And my experience was similar to that, as I probably have bored you with in the past, right? I mean, except your guidance was more specific than mine. Mine was, I was told you're going to college. I wasn't told where to go. I wasn't told how to get in. I wasn't told what to study. I wasn't told how to pay for it. It was just, you're going to college. Okay, great. And now that, as you know, we have kids that are close in age, and my 17-year-old, I'm talking to him about college. I'm giving him a little more specific guidance than I got, but no, it's pretty interesting. And so I ended up in insurance law because I loved economic theory and finance, and except, as you know, I'm allergic to math. And so insurance lawyer is perfect because it's all those concepts just without numbers, and instead that we use words, right? And so that's kind of my story, but similar sort of thing of, you just sort of hadn't planned on this, but it was a great fit from the start. And
now, wouldn't you recommend that your boys think about it? I mean, I'm always talking to younger people about insurance as a career, a professional career, that because I didn't hear that growing up, certainly.
No, and I think it's amazing. I think what you want in a career is something that's really interesting, right? It's fun work to do. That you work with really bright people solving, really pretty complicated things, and you have a good time and you can have an impact, right? I mean, those are the kinds of things that you sort of, would, I think, consider to be a fulfilling career. And you have an opportunity to learn from really great people. You have an opportunity to sort of help, pass that on and mentor others. And I think insurance offers all that. So I'm with you. I think it's a great path. There are lots of other careers where you can have, meaningful, impactful roles too, right? So there are plenty of choices, but this certainly, I think, needs to be on the radar. So I'm kind of with you on that. Maybe one day our kids will, work together helping place, complicated risks and dealing with tricky claims for their clients too. Who knows? All right. So now you mentioned CAC Specialty. Let's talk about that briefly, because you guys have and I know it was funny because when you launched that and then I saw, the folks in your Denver office who I'd worked with in the past for mutual clients, and then some of your other offices, you've had explosive growth. Let's talk about what has been the secret, other than getting top-notch people who care a great deal about the work that they do. But tell us, kind of a little bit about the CAC story in the last couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, it's been about 20 months, and I think the people The timing was perfect. And I will tell you, when we started off, the first 6 or 7 months were pre-COVID, and we were doing great. We were doing very well. Then COVID hit, and we, as a management team, looked at each other and thought, oh no, like, how are we going to do this? We're a startup. How are we going to get people to choose us as their broker when we can't fly to see them? We can't tell them our story face to face. Like, this is really scary. And that first month after COVID, we had our best month yet. That May following a year ago was better than that. It has been absolutely unreal. And I think the market itself has had a lot to do with that. The insurance market, which was hardening pre-COVID, hardened very quickly with COVID. And insurance buyers were scared about what was going to happen to them at their renewals. And they were willing to make a risk and to take a chance on a broker that the firm they may not have ever heard of, but they knew the people. And they knew that the people and their relationships with insurance underwriters made more of a difference than it had historically. And that's the story. But it has been, we ended up in our first year, we surpassed what we had expected to do in year 4. So It has been really just fortuitous. And I think we're all excited, but very grateful at the same time.
Sure. No, that's awesome. And I mean, I wouldn't say it's a surprise to any of the rest of us on the outside, given the team that you guys have. It was sort of built for success, but it's really nice to see that, that's working. And I'll tell you, not to butter you up too much, but I remember that email that you sent last year that was like, it was about a page and it was, and I sent you a note, right? You probably forgot this, but I
remembered it.
I mean, cause we all get like 7,918 emails a day, right? And those are just the weekends and holidays. And, you skim a lot of stuff, right? You pay attention to the emails that come from your clients. I mean, those are the ones that you read first, okay, this is a client.
Right, triage for sure.
Yeah, right. Is there an emergency? Do I need to deal with this right now? Is this just like kind of an FYI thing? Is this something I need to circle back with them later on today? I mean, whatever, right? You go through those. And then the sort of second, to like I look at emails that come in from our opposing counsel and stuff and figuring, okay, do I need to deal with this right now? And, and sort of, you can go through this process and filter them. And then, there's sort of the general literature emails that, of like this news development or that, whatever, and you kind of keep your finger on the pulse. But then other emails that come in from folks that and have a great deal of respect and admiration for, you read those, right? And I saw yours, and it was like this. It was this just perfectly drafted email that just had, and again, it was about a page. It was just the sort of the Goldilocks link that it had, sort of great tips, and then information that people needed to take action. And I was like, my gosh, I should not let this just go unnoticed. I should send Bain a note. You probably got lots of those because it was a great email, but that's the kind of thing that I think is. Communication is really hard to do during COVID, but that was one that I thought was awesome.
Well,
so,
I totally appreciate. I do remember that you sent a note, and it's funny because to create the succinct message takes hours.
Yes.
And lots of people putting lots of words down and then editing them out. But so I appreciated that somebody noticed and thought that it was effective. That's great.
Well, no, that's right. And it's really, I think everybody can be a better writer. And because it's hard work to really write well. And I tell our folks, occasionally the firm is dumb enough to ask me to talk to our lawyers about, things. And I tell our folks, look, I sort of treat writing like Jenga. You keep taking things out until it begins to collapse. And then when it does, you can put it right back in, and that way what's left is everything that sort of needs to be there, nothing more, nothing less. And that's kind of, one way to go about it. But you're right. I mean, the process of refining things to the point that it's finished. I mean, kind of the way that we treat briefs or letters that we might write to, an insurance company or to a lawyer for an insurance company or a brief that we're going to file with a judge. we kind of refine it until we have no more edits, because the worst feeling is, you file something and then you read, sort of the one that has the file stamp on it, and you're like, why is that in there? And, or why didn't I make this point?
This is a complete aside, but does it drive you nuts for your kids when their teachers assign them projects with their whole goal is a certain number of words?
Hate that.
I hate it. I have to tell my daughter regularly, this is not real life. In real life, you want it to be as few words as possible to get your message through.
That's right. Yes. It's like the anti-Jenga.
It is.
Where you just clutter things up with, whatever. I mean, like here's an example, right? Lots of lawyers love to write in order to blah, 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 right? Just say two.
Right.
You turn 3 words into one. And, or here's another one. A number of courts have held. Just say several, that shaved 3 words into one. This idea that, you should write a certain number of words. I understand why teachers do it. I was a teacher in a former life, and I understand what drives them to do that is they want to just make sure people do enough work. But in terms of creating great writers, that's sort of the last way that you should go about it. All right, I feel like we've launched a second blog here.
Sorry,
we're going to call it Good Writing. No, it's okay. It's important. It's hard. And one of the things I was telling, I had lunch with David Brown, who I know you know. I had lunch with David yesterday. He's a fabulous coverage lawyer. Was one of my mentors growing up when I was a young lawyer, and I worked with David. And I was telling David about some case I just won on coverage for construction defects, and I said, So I filed this motion. It was a pretty tight motion. It was about 12 pages on why these 2 particular carriers owed coverage for something. In fact, I sent the same briefs to Claire, and I said, here, read these. We're going to have dinner with the lawyer on the other side, who I beat, but he's a good friend and he's a fine lawyer. And so we're going to read these briefs before we do that. And it was funny because it was against 2 carriers. And one of the carriers said, fine, we'll pay, and we'll just, you don't need to have a hearing. We'll just agree. Like, okay, great. Except, I had to spend all this time working on this. And so, I need something on my attorney's fees. And they said, okay, fine. We'll, pay you something for your attorney's fees. I said, okay, great. Not mine, my client's attorney's fees. And they said, yeah, we'll pay you something on that. And I said, okay, well, here's what I have in it. And they said, oh gosh, you should have spent 6 hours on this motion. I said, no, hang on there, sport. Look. If somebody came into my office with a 3-foot stack of, stuff, right? It had 20 different subcontractors over an 8-year period, right? So I had 160 policies, and then I had to figure out what the underlying claims are about. Then I had to go through these 160 policies and figure out which ones were possibly triggered, which ones had completed operations coverage, which ones had, ongoing operations coverage, and then, figure out do any of them have some, wonky, exclusions or endorsements or whatever. And then I condensed that all down into these 7 carriers are our best claims. These 5 are sort of our second tier of carriers. And then these 3, we're just going to cut loose. We don't see a viable path to coverage for them. So those we're going to let out of our case. And then I turned that into, it was a pretty tight 12-page motion. And I said, and so that took about 3 months, and it took an enormous amount of time. And what you saw was a pretty simple, clean motion, but it took a huge amount of time to get to that. And, it wasn't 6 hours. I don't know if that's, what you spent on your motions, but for us, it takes longer. So, okay. All right. So, let's talk about, you talked a little bit about customer service and how you learned that coming up. I mean, what do you do? Because I know we hear from our clients, and sometimes they're very frustrated with their brokers. I'm sure you hear from clients who probably are very frustrated with their lawyers. But I know your clients love working with you because I know several of your clients. So tell me, what do you do to try to keep them, in that zone? And what do you not do to keep them in that zone? I mean, do's and don'ts from client service standpoint from a broker view. Tell us about that.
I mean, I think the easiest thing that we can do is just the service, the calling them back, being available, thinking of what they need before they realize they need it. Being proactive versus being reactive is a huge differentiator. I found in my career amongst, coworkers and brokers, you have to be staffed to be able to do that. And I feel like in my career, I've been fortunate enough to have that be the case. so that we can be proactive. But I think being honest, delivering that bad news. I mean, that was the lesson I learned early in my career, how to do that. And that it's way worse not to do that, Right. And that's being honest with the clients about what to expect. It's being honest with underwriters about what's going on, no games. And I think that has certainly served me well. Transparency goes along with that. It's here's what I'm doing, here's why I'm doing it. And everybody knows and understands that. I think the connections and the relationships that we have are also really important. So connections with our clients, but connecting them with the underwriters directly, connecting them with people like you guys and other service providers that can help them. I think that is important when they know that we're really looking out for them and thinking about that. It's just conveying that you care. I think there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that in probably all aspects of your life. But with clients, I think it is just being proactive, reading. I read a lot. Right. And then I share that information with them that I think is meaningful to them. Some of them maybe don't think it's meaningful.
Sure.
My coworkers I share lots of information with that I'm sure they just delete. But I do a lot of reading. So I think it makes me better and it makes it more fun, if nothing else, even if nobody else cares.
Hey, I'm curious. I know, because D&O is its own special line of coverage, right? It's unlike any other in terms of the client focus on it. And, it's some companies that we work with, D&O is the only one that gets a certain level of scrutiny. When, they really don't care about the comp policy or, whatever, right? I mean, some of the lawyers we work with are like, it's fine, but we do want to look at the D&O or whatever, because it comes up for the board. So I'm curious, I know you work with risk managers a lot. How often do you find yourself working with in-house counsel when you place a policy or renew one?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a good question. I was thinking about that. Risk management typically is either going to report into legal or report into finance. Yep. And so we're regularly working with risk managers. I say, when we're lucky, we also have in-house counsel involved. And sometimes that's very natural. If risk management reports into legal, then that is going to be more natural to happen. Otherwise, it would be when there's something that is specifically tricky about a transaction, or perhaps there's some choice in language where we ask them, hey, this is really going to be dependent on perhaps something that's going on in your business. Is there someone there that can help us understand your contractual liabilities, your indemnity obligations, that sort of thing? But so I'd say it's probably maybe 30% of the time where somebody from legal internally at the company would be involved at some point in the D&O renewal process.
Yeah, and that's interesting. We work with some of our clients. We tend to work with lawyers, right? In-house counsel at our clients. We also work with lots of risk managers, and sometimes we work with just one group, sometimes just the other group, sometimes both. And part of it depends on that structure that you talked about of, sort of as part of treasury / finance, right. Or is it part of the GC's office? And for a couple of our clients, they're sort of one foot in both camps. I mean, they kind of have this dual track, kind of parallel process. But I was curious about that. I mean, and the other, of course, some of our clients only call us when they get a claim, and it's, they got a denial letter, they got a reservation of rights letter, whatever. Sometimes they call us with, hey, we got this letter from some alphabet soup agency that wants us to preserve documents, and is this a claim, and should we report this, and that kind of stuff. And then some of our clients get us involved very early of, hey, we're placing this, say we're placing a cyber policy for the first time, and can you help us review this. And our clients know we're not brokers, right? We don't sell policies. We can't tell them, is this a good premium? We can't tell them, are these limits, is this the right number for you? We can help our clients think through of, if you had a claim, what might you need in terms of, responding to it, and whether it's, liability or notice obligations or, whatever the line of coverage is. But, our answer is, look, what you really need here is part of your questions are broker issues. Part of them are legal questions, and we can answer the legal questions and we can help you think through the broker ones. But, that's a broker issue, and, they need to weigh in on that. And then we can kind of put it into this sort of blender and come out with a decision at the end here. But how often do you find yourself working with outside lawyers? Is that pretty normal?
Yeah,
pretty rare?
I mean, I would say that's increasingly normal. And
Okay.
I'll explain a little bit of the dynamic why I think that's why.
You're the best guest ever, Bain. Let me just tell you, I'm sorry. I don't mean to rudely interrupt you, but just since you're going to answer the question and then say, let me tell you why, that makes you the best podcast guest. Why you haven't been tagged before, I don't know. But okay, sorry, please go ahead.
I think so. Historically, we would deal with outside counsel when there was a claim, right? And that could be
Right.
in terms of actually outside defense counsel. For claims, typically if you think of a D&O claim, that we would be involved in explaining to the carrier what was happening on the claim. So often that involved outside counsel with those
Sure.
explanations. And then occasionally it would be coverage counsel, specifically if there was an issue on the claim where there's reservation of rights letter that's not, seems like maybe this is going to get sideways. Let's get outside counsel involved. And so that's historically where we were mostly seeing outside counsel. Occasionally, we would see clients send out their policies for review to outside counsel. That's something we actually encourage.
Sure.
We probably have a short list of those firms that we think do that really well. And you certainly are on that list. We've done
God
many of
bless you,
those
Bain.
together. But it can be helpful for us just to think through the words that we see every single day. Like that we see, and we'll try to overlay the words with what we're reading about in case law, but it's different when we are talking to an attorney that's what you're living and breathing every day. So it's helpful for us to get sort of a fresh perspective. It can also be useful when negotiating with the insurers who, instead of it being, Bain's coming and asking for this again on this account, and say, their outside counsel that they have hired and paid has identified this as a deficiency in the policy and we need you to address it. That for good or for bad, that has some weight. So that can that can certainly be helpful. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's cool.
Now, where I see this, I mentioned the development where we're working with outside counsel more and more is really specifically in this SPAC, DSPAC world that we're living in, where there are just so many, we see so many opportunities for coverage catastrophes, I'm going to say. And I think it really could be that significant, where you're involving several different policies, many times 2 or 3 sets of policies, and around a complicated transaction. And we are always recommending that our clients be seeking advice from their counsel. Ideally, we are involved in those conversations too, because we're learning. This is a world that's changing every single day. We want to understand from the securities lawyers what's happening. We want to understand from the coverage counsel how what we're thinking about doing, the things that we're thinking about doing on the coverage side. Does this make sense based on how the transaction is actually being structured? It's an ever evolving world, and we view ourselves as working hand in hand with the attorneys to figure it out to the benefit of the clients. So every day we're dealing with outside counsel from that perspective.
Yeah, no, that's right. And that's sort of our experience too. And I think the key thing is to communicate to clients how to really get at some of these issues. They really do need these different perspectives, right? And you can't find it just in your shop, and you can't find it just in our shop, and or shops like yours and ours. You've got to kind of get both perspectives in there. That's really a key. All right. Now, our approach, Bain, is we try to stay in the background, try not to break things unless, we have to. And we try to kind of, get along and gently guide through issues. Is that your experience with most lawyers, or do you kind of get the, let's ready, fire, aim folks who just want to go in and launch a lawsuit and say, well, we'll just figure it out later?
Yeah, we certainly see some of both of that, right?
And
we view that as part of our job too in counseling our clients who, honestly, our advice is typically, I'm not going to say free because they pay us for our services and most of our clients pay us very well, but we're not being paid by the hour for our advice. So that's where we can sometimes come in and say, hey, you know what? I think that there is some work to be done here on this particular claim for certain. And outside counsel can be very complementary to that work and that approach to the carriers. But filing a lawsuit is not, in our view, going to necessarily drive the best results the quickest. So we find ourselves playing that bad cop occasionally.
No, I think that's good advice. Look, they build courthouses for a reason, but that doesn't mean that, everybody needs to go take a tour of it. It's there when you need it, but you shouldn't resort to it. It's kind of like hospitals too. They're there when you need them. But that doesn't mean you want to go spend time in one unnecessarily. So,
we feel like so much of our job is really working on that front end to make sure the policy language is right. And that's where we really like to work the most with the attorneys, so that then when you have a claim, you're not fighting about it.
That's right. We do too. Some of our clients, kind of have that same view. Some just say, I'll get to the lawyers when I really have a problem. And that's fine too. We'll work with clients at any point in the process, but we're with you. We like it earlier the better is, ounce of prevention, pound of cure, that kind of thing. There I did a math equation. All right. So Bain, let me just close up with this. If you weren't an insurance broker, what would you do for a living? What's plan B? Yeah,
plan B for me, I volunteer at a few hospitals. I am a chaplain. I go into hospital rooms and pray with people at MD Anderson and a local hospital in Southeast Georgia. That's something that if I could not work in insurance, which would be sad, but I would spend more time. I would spend more time doing that. I would say it's great for giving me perspective. Let me tell you, the worst thing I might have to do in insurance is usually never as scary as standing outside of, a closed hospital room door and not knowing what you're going to find on the other side.
Yeah. So. No, that's great. That's a great answer. I remember I was in a court once where I knew the judge before I had a case with him before he became a judge. And, I was in his court and, we're friendly. And I said, I watched him sentence a couple of people. And one day I was over there for a hearing and it was not fun. Right. And, the people, the defendants' families are there and they're in tears and all this kind of stuff. And, I watched him, he had to do it and went through it. And after it was done, he said, you want to come back and have a cup of coffee? I said, sure. And, I said, Judge, that's got to be the worst part of your job. And he said, yes, it is. I said, what's the best part? And his answer, I thought he would say, well, when I get to, do weddings or something. I kind of figured that would be his answer. It wasn't. His answer was awesome. He said, when I get to swear in new citizens. And I thought, oh, what a great answer. So it's always important to have perspective on, I may be dealing with this right now and this seems really important or stressful or, whatever, but there's lots of other stuff going on in the world.
Well, and to realize that the people that you're dealing with too, you don't know what they've gone through that day.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. You're walking down the street, right, and you see somebody and you don't know if they just lost their job. You have no idea what happened to that person before you see them on the street. Listen, Bain, is there anything you'd like to share, like last tips for our audience on, here are some things you need to think about as you see the market today? Anything you want to leave our folks with as a free advice from Bain Head, which is, it's hard to put a price tag on that, but I want to give you the shot. If there's something you think that you're seeing clients maybe not spend as much attention on as they could, it's open mic, Bain. Have at it. Yeah.
The one thing I'd say about the D&O market continues to be challenging and we call it a hard market. Prices are increasing. They continue to increase, not at the same pace as they were increasing a year ago. But the thing that has not changed dramatically is coverage. So we are still able to negotiate broad coverage terms tailored coverage terms for specific needs of a client. And so that's something just not to lose thought of, that it's still worth spending the time thinking through, what is this actually covering and what do we need it to cover? We've been fortunate in this marketplace to work with underwriters who still are willing to look at things that way and to differentiate on that basis. And I hope that that's not going to change.
I don't think it will. And that goes back to that, famous email we've been talking about, which you should post to your website. It's just, it explains, how you go about sort of dealing with these issues. And you don't just say, send me a policy and take it. You look at it and try and understand, what are we trying to solve here? Is this the right approach? Is this, are we comfortable with, this premium spend? Are we comfortable with, this level of limits? Are we comfortable with, kind of how it fits into the rest of our risk management program? And, what we tell clients is, look, you can be on anywhere on the sort of the continuum of risk between, I want a lot of risk or I want very little risk. And then that's a business decision. And we will help you, implement that as your lawyers. All we really care about is that you think it through, and that you say, look, I don't want to spend the money on premiums. I'm willing to accept more risk. That's fine. If you say I want less uncertainty and volatility, so to do that, I'm willing to commit more money to the process. That's fine too. And wherever you are on that spectrum, that's a business choice, and that's your choice to make. And we will help you drive there. With your broker and your risk management team, your in-house legal team, and your lawyers will help you drive there.
Right, to make an informed decision instead of just acting out of ignorance. That's I think that's what that's our roles in general for both of us, to make sure the clients are educated about what's available, and so that they can make better decisions.
Okay. Well, look, Bain, thank you for taking your time today. We know that you have 1,000 things more important to do. I mean, taking a nap would have been better than you doing this, but we're grateful for it. And so is our audience. I'm going to thank you on their behalf. They're a really great group, but they've, I think, been enriched by your comments. And the good news is that the importance of your comments has sort of offset the negativity of mine. So they're net ahead. But it's been super awesome. And I hope that one day you will come back and be a guest again, especially since you said, let me tell you the answer and let me tell you why. That sort of says like podcast A-list guest right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, stay tuned. We may come back to you and say, Bain, how'd you like to come back? We hope that you'll consider it when we do.
Well, this has been great. I'm honored to have been a part of it. Thanks for inviting me.
All right. We'll be back with more episodes of Covered. Thank you.